Welcome to Lecture 11 in our Foundation of Economics series. I'm Dr. Magda Mustafa Sadiq, Associate Professor of Applied Economics, and today we shift our focus from microeconomics to macroeconomics policies. And today we are going to concentrate on a broader economic landscape. In this lecture, we will explore the key instruments governments and central banks use to stabilize and grow economies. We begin with fiscal policy, where we analyze how government spending and taxation influence national income and employment. Then we turn to monetary policy, unpacking the tools used by central banks to manage inflation, control interest rates, and guide economic activities. We will also cover the critical concept of money supply, understanding how it's measured and how it matters, why it matters. Finally, we examine banking systems, looking at how financial institutions support economic stability and drive investments and growth. So by the end of this lecture, you will have a solid understanding of how macroeconomic policies shape the environment in which business operate and individuals make financial decisions. In this slide, we will talk about fiscal policy, a vital tool governments use to manage the economy. So let us break it down in a simple and clear way. Fiscal policy refers to the use of government spending and taxation to influence a country's economy. In simple terms, it's how governments collect money through taxes and how they spend it to help keep the economy stable and growing. What are the four main objectives of fiscal policy? Control inflation. When prices rise too fast, the government can reduce spending or increase taxes to reduce demand. Stimulate economic growth. During a slowdown, governments may spend more or cut taxes to encourage more business activity and consumer spending. Reduce unemployment by investing in infrastructure or public projects. The government creates jobs and supports employment. Stabilize the business cycle. Fiscal policy helps smooth out economic fluctuations, reducing the highs of booms and the lows of recessions. We have two types of fiscal policy: expansionary fiscal policy used in times of economic slowdown, where government increases spending or decreases taxes. This will boost demand, encourage investment, and creates jobs. And we have contractionary fiscal policy used when the economy is overheating, so governments has to cut spending or increase taxes. And this will help reduce inflation and stabilize economy. So during a recession, a government might launch a large public works program like building roads, schools, and hospitals. This increases employment, puts money in people's hands, and boosts demand for goods and services. So to sum up, fiscal policy is how governments use spending and taxation to manage the economy. Its main goals are to control inflation, encourage growth, reduce unemployment, and stabilize the economy. So it's a powerful tool for shaping a healthy and balanced economy. So always remember, fiscal policy is about making the economy work for everyone, ensuring jobs, stability, and growth. through smart use of public money. As I have mentioned that there are two types of fiscal policy. We have the expansionary fiscal policy, and this is used when the economy is in a recession or a slowdown. The government increases spending or cuts taxes to boost demand. The goal is to encourage more investment, consumer spending, and job creation. Example, building more schools, giving tax cuts to households. This puts more money in people's hands and boosts economic activity. We have contractionary fiscal policy, and this is used when the economy is overheating, when inflation is rising too fast. The government reduces spending and or raises taxes to slow down demand. So the aim is to prevent inflation and stabilize prices. Example, raising income taxes or cutting back on subsidies. This reduces excess demand in the economy. So governments use two main tools to carry out fiscal policy. Government expenditure. Spending on government uses two main tools to carry out fiscal policy. The first one is government expenditure, and the second one is taxation. So spending on infrastructure, education, healthcare, and public services. So this creates jobs, boosts demand, and support development. Taxation includes income tax, corporate tax, VAT, and more. Taxes influence how much money people and business have to spend. So now let us talk about the government's budget balance. We have budget deficit and budget surplus. The budget deficit happens when government spending is greater than its revenue. So often it occurs during recessions when the government spends more to stimulate the economy. While budget surplus happens when revenue is greater than government spending, used to pay off debts or prepare for future downturns. So if the government collects $100 billion in taxes but spends $120 billion, that is a deficit of $20 billion. So if it only spends $90 billion, that is a surplus of $10 billion. So to wrap up, fiscal policy comes in two forms: expansionary to grow the economy and contractionary to cool it down. Governments use spending and taxation as their main tools, and whether the government runs a deficit or surplus, it depends on how much it spends compared to how much it collects. As I told you, understanding fiscal policy helps us see how governments respond to economic challenges, whether it's fighting inflation or creating jobs. Now let us explore monetary policy, a powerful tool used by central banks to maintain economic stability. Let us define what is monetary policy. Monetary policy is a process by which a country's central bank, like the Federal Reserve in the US or the Bank of England, controls the money supply and interest rates. Its goal to guide the economy toward stability, growth, and low inflation. The key goals of monetary policy are price stability, keeping inflation low and predictable, full employment, supporting job creation and reducing unemployment, Stable financial markets, promoting confidence and avoiding financial crisis. Sustainable economic growth, encouraging long-term development without overheating the economy. The types of monetary policy. There are two main types of monetary policy. Expansionary monetary policy, used during a recession or a slowdown. How it works: it lowers interest rates, increase the money supply. So why? This makes borrowing more cheaper, encourages spending and investment, and helps stimulate the economy. Example: lowering interest rates on loans so that businesses invest more and people buy more. The second type is contractionary monetary policy, used when the economy is overheating and inflation is high. How it works? By raising interest rates, reduce the money supply. Why? This helps reduce spending, limit borrowing, and control inflation. Example: if prices are rising too fast, the central bank raises rates to slow things down. Monetary policy is managed by the central bank, which is independent from the government in many countries. They use tools like setting the base interest rate, conducting open market operations, buying or selling government bonds, setting reserve requirements for commercial banks. So to summarize, monetary policy is about managing money supply and interest rates. It's used to maintain price stability, full employment, and economic growth. And there are two types: expansionary to boost the economy and contractionary to reduce inflation. So it's controlled by the central bank, not the government. In this slide, we will break down the main tools of monetary policy, the techniques used by the central bank to influence the economy. Central banks do not directly control prices or employment, but they use several powerful tools to steer the economy in the right direction. These tools influence the money supply, interest rates, and credit availability. There are four tools: open market operations. This is one of the most commonly used tools. It involves buying or selling government securities in the open market. When the central bank buys securities, it injects money into the banking system, increases money supply, lowers interest rates. When it sells securities, it withdraws money from the hands of the public, reduces money supply, raises interest rates. Think of it as turning the tap of money flow on or off. The second tool, interest rate policy, also called the policy rate, discount rate, or repo rate. This is the interest rate that the central bank charges commercial banks for borrowing money. Lowering the rate makes borrowing cheaper, encourages loans, spending, and investment, while raising the rate makes borrowing more expensive, reduces the inflationary pressure. It's one of the quickest ways to impact the economy. Reserve requirements 3. This refers to the minimum percentage of deposits that commercial banks must hold in reserve, either in their vault with the central bank. Lowering reserve requirements so banks can lend more expands the money supply. Hiring reserve requirements, banks lend less, contracts the money supply. So this tool is rarely changed, but when used, it has a strong impact. Moral suasion. Unlike the previous tools, this is one of non-binding. It's when the central bank persuades or encourages banks to behave in ways that support economic goals. For example, asking banks to limit lending during inflationary periods, or encouraging them to increase lending to small business during a slowdown. So it's all about building cooperation through communication rather than regulation. So to recap, the main tools of monetary policy are open market operations, buying or selling securities. Second, interest rate policy, changing the central bank's lending rate. Third, reserve requirements, adjusting how much banks must keep in reserve. Moral suasion, persuading banks to follow policy goals. Each tool helps the central bank manage the economy, balancing growth, inflation, and financial stability. In this slide, we will explain one of the most essential concepts in economics, the money supply. We will also explore its main components, M0, M1, M2, and M3, in a simple and easy to understand way. The money supply is the total amount of money available in an economy at a given time. It includes all the money people can use to spend, save, or invest. Understanding the different types or measure of money supply helps economists and central banks monitor and manage economic activity. So let us look at the four main measures of the money supply from the narrowest to the broadest. M0, reserve money, base money. This is the most basic form of money, also called high-powered money. It includes currency in circulation, banknotes and coins in people's hands. Second, reserves held by commercial banks at the central bank. So M0 is the foundation on which all other forms of money are built. The second type, M1, called narrow money. M1 includes everything in M0 plus demand deposits like money in checking accounts plus it's M0 plus demand deposits. So these are the funds that you can access immediately for spending. M2 includes, also M2 is a broader measure of the money supply. It includes everything in M1 plus savings deposits plus time deposits. And the time deposits are short time deposits like 3 or 6 months is fixed deposits. So this money isn't always spent right away, but it can be converted into cash relatively easy. M3, extended broad money. M3 goes even further and includes everything in M2 plus large time deposits and institutional money market funds. M3 is used more for analyzing long-term investment behavior and large financial institutions. So its measures in stages M0, M1, M2, and M3, and each level gives economists a clearer picture of how money moves through the system. Determinants of money supply, the key factors that influence how much money is circulating in the economy at any given time. and the money supply isn't fixed. It changes based on several important factors. So the three determinants are central bank actions. The central bank plays the leading role in controlling the money supply. It uses tools like open market operations, interest rate policy, and reserve requirements. Second, commercial banks' lending behavior. Commercial banks also influence the money supply through their lending decisions. When banks lend more, they create more money through the credit creation process. Deposits become new loans. When they tighten lending, the money supply grows more slowly. The third, public preferences for cash versus deposits. The third factor is the public's behavior, how people choose to hold their money. If people prefer to hold cash, less money stays in the banking system, which limits the bank's ability to create credit. If people prefer to keep their money in bank accounts, banks have more funds to lend, increasing the money supply. So this factor reflects trust in the banking system, interest rates, and economic conditions. So money supply depends on central bank policies, commercial banks' willingness to lend, and the public preferences for cash or deposits. Together, these determine how much money is available in the economy, which in turn affects inflation, interest rates, and economic activity. In this slide, we will take a closer look at the banking system, how it works, and the different types of banks that serve various functions in the economy. So the banking system is a network of financial institutions licensed to provide banking services. These institutions help people and business manage money, access credit, and support economic growth. Let us explore the main types of banks and what each one does. Central Bank. This is the main monetary authority in the country. The key roles include issue currency, regulating the banking sector, managing monetary policy to ensure price stability and economic growth. Examples: the Federal Reserve in the US, the Central Bank of Sudan, the European Central Bank, commercial banks. These are the banks most people interact with daily. They accept deposits from individuals and business, provide loans, credit cards, and mortgages, offer everyday financial services like ATMs, mobile banking, and money transfers. Examples: Bank of Khartoum, Barclays, or your local bank branch. Development banks. Development banks focuses on long-term projects that help grow the economy. They provide funding for infrastructure, agriculture and industrial development, education and housing projects. So these types of banks aim to promote sustainable development and reduce poverty. Investment banks. These banks serve large businesses, governments, and investors. The main services include issuing stocks and bonds, mergers and acquisitions, financial advisory, and portfolio management. So think of the investment banks as the architect of the corporate financial world. Islamic banks in some economies. Islamic banks operates under Sharia law, which prohibits interest or riba. Instead of charging interest, they use profit sharing, leasing, or joint ventures. They focus on ethical investment and risk sharing. They are popular in countries like Sudan, Saudi Arabia, and Malaysia. So to recap, the banking system is made up of several types of banks. central banks, commercial banks, development banks, investment banks, Islamic banks. Each type of bank plays a unique and important role in supporting the economy. Thank you, my students. This is the end of the lecture.